Thank you, Chris. Now we have Lucia from Fondazione Bassetti in Milan.
Thank you so much. If possible, I would ask my question that I've been told to postpone to now for Professor Longo. Building on your slide in which you were presenting the 8 factors that are hindering longevity presented by the Cardiology Association, I couldn't help but noticing that smoke, at least here in Italy, is a monopoly of state. So in a way, around 70% of the revenues of a cigarette package goes to the state. So, which could paradoxically use those revenues to cover welfare costs. So do you think that one day we will ever solve this paradox, or it's not really in the agenda?
Maybe you can answer after the round. Okay.
Okay.
Just keep in mind.
Okay. So thank you very much for having me here. My name is Lucia Dal Negro, and I'm representing Fondazione Giannino Bassetti and the lab here today. And thank you again to Fondazione Cini for this invitation and this wonderful meeting, to which I will contribute by presenting ageism's impacts from a workplace perspective across spatial geographies, meaning different latitudes. So outlining, hopefully, no? Okay. So outlining the contents of my contribution, I would like to start by setting a little bit the scenario, providing some super brief literature review that will contextualize the concept of ageism within some theoretical discourse. Then I will make some examples of how ageism is really affecting the coexistence of different generations at workplaces. And I will dig deeper, presenting in particular the medical sector, and I will tell you why specifically that area. Then I will analyze the evolution of the concept of workplace, which is really changed, especially after COVID-19. And I will ask myself and everyone also the possibility to draw the same conclusions at different latitudes. So, for instance, analyzing workplaces in the Global South. Then I will hopefully reach to the end of my presentation by pointing out some ideas that could be framed within a common framework linking age diversity, intergenerationality, workplace, migration, civic participation, and education. So let's start by saying that... Okay. So everything can be framed in terms of theoretical approaches to different streams of literature, starting from diversity management, which highlighted the importance of dealing with diversity, not just for pure compliance, but for a strategic reason within organizations. So considering intergenerationality as a way to avoid ageism, which in this presentation is going to be presented as a negative phenomenon, as a resource at organizational level. And then linking this stream of literature to the probably most used definition of ageism, which is the one of WHO 2021. It's super important and interesting because it was also highlighted in previous presentation how age is also piled up with other discriminatory variables, like, for instance, gender, to the point that it's very hard to disentangle, and it becomes a very big and heavy trigger for discrimination at workplaces. So here we can then consider HR management literature, highlighting how age-inclusive HR policies are really important, but provided the fact that they are integrated within the organizational culture. So there is a collectivity that should really embrace those policies in order for them to be really effective. Moving towards the social psychology theory, here, of course, the attention is given to the perception of belonging to a specific group based on age affinity, and so the sense of recognition to certain in-groups or out-groups, which at workplace is driving decisions and also social behaviors. Lastly, organizational justice and equity theory are highlighting that this sense of belonging to a specific workplace based on age diversity is also a factor of the perception of the value that you are providing as a worker to that place and how this value is rewarded. And the reward is not just purely money, very brutally speaking, but it's also a derivation of distributive, procedural, and interactional justice. So it's a very complex and multidimensional factor. So, having said that, let's try to go from theory to practice, and let's see how those impacts of ageism, both reflected within organizations in which the vast majority of people are senior professionals versus another option, basically the other pole of this dynamic, which is a work organization in which the vast majority are junior professionals, generate some imbalances, which are mainly focused on a different risk exposure, because in organizations in which the majority of population is made out of senior professionals, there is a tendency of repeating decisional patterns which are anchored in the past. There is also a fragility in crisis management, especially when this generation reaches the point of be retired, and so there is the so-called cliff edge effect of Alesia, in which all of a sudden a huge amount of people, very experienced, leave the company. And then, of course, issues at level of career path, because middle management tend to be could be stuck if the majority of the people in a company is populated by senior profiles. Opposite to that, there might be the case of companies in which junior professionals are the majority, and there is the risk of not being able to deal with crisis, because there is no memory of how to deal with, for instance, an economic downturn or a product crisis. So there is no memory for this type of critical situations. So, I mean, ageisms with symmetrically different trajectories could really make workplaces a very complex environment to deal with. So, trying to exemplify even more this line of reasonment, I would like to focus on the medical sector. I think I'll ask you, sorry. The medical sector. Why the medical sector? Because at least here in Italy, but I guess also at European level, is one of the most affected by staff shortages. Data say that at Italian level, almost 30,000 doctors are missing, and between 60,000 and 100,000 of nurses are missing. So the point here is retention, how to keep people of different generations, for sure, at work in a way that is productive and rational in a way. So how the space in this sense could help to reach this goal? Well, for instance, by providing more knowledge exchange, thanks to the presence of hybrid working stations in which knowledge can circulate easily across different generations working in the same workplace. or, for instance, by avoiding stress-related crises, one for all, burnout, which in the medical sector is quite common. And in this case, different generations' needs may be, met by structuring spaces in a way that every generation has its own way to find balance and some distressing moments. And also trying to dismantle hierarchies, not because we like anarchy, but because vertical top-down hierarchies in the medical sector has proved to be a discouraging factor in terms of fidelization and retention of young professionals. So the possibility to have briefing rooms open, physically built in a circular way in order to be more inclusive, more accessible, it's something that certainly at space level could help this type of goals. So now, having said that, of course, it's interesting to highlight how workspaces changed in the last years, especially after COVID-19, right? So this is a bar, but it looks like a workspace. People are working from there. And so in the next slides, I will increase the amount of evidence by providing other pictures showcasing public transports which look like office spaces, supermarket where you can do your grocery, but you can also have your dental check. So you can, optimize the services that you can experience in just one location, in just one place. Very professional working spaces at home. Hospitals where you can buy glasses, and again, bars where you can work super peacefully. So what does this is telling us? I mean, what does it mean? Well, it means that the concept itself of workspace has evolved and has mainly taken a twofold direction, including the so-called hybrid workplaces, which are places in which the boundaries between personal life and working lives are blurred, like the case of working from the tube or from home for a never-ending session of a meeting with your boss. And opposite to that, multifunctional workplaces are those in which you can experience different things simultaneously according to a kind of multitasking approach which is stemming from platform economies dynamics, which are more and more common thanks to the pervasive use of digital technologies. Of course, what we are saying here works pretty much in this it's okay. In this context, but I can't help but thinking that at some other latitudes, a workplace looks like that. And this is a picture that I'm using because I'm personally working in Eastern Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, and in the childcare sector. So I'm used at considering those really workplaces. Of course, here I don't want to generalize in saying that Sub-Saharan Africa represents the whole global South. I'm not saying that, but I'm, on the contrary, taking this as an example to express my point, which concerning Africa, probably the battery is low. Okay, has to take into consideration the fact that when we are thinking about the coexistence, so the coexistence of different generations in the same workplaces, first of all, workplaces are very different from those at which we are more used to stay, and there are three important keywords to consider: retention, participation in the entrepreneurial, in any entrepreneurial ventures, and informal economy. So in the next slides, I will clarify this point more in details, because retention in Sub-Saharan Africa is very, very low due to the chronic use of short-term contracts, and also due to the fact that people, as soon as they become skilled workers, tend to migrate. So migration here becomes a mega trend that has to be taken into consideration. Then secondly, participation to the business cohorts is not so open, considering that family businesses are representing the bulk of local economies in these contexts, but it's very unclear the logics of successions in these businesses. So this is, of course, discouraging skilled and junior professionals from entering this family-owned business, which, by the way, can be even very big. I'm not just talking about SMEs. And this is, of course, something to consider, because then young people at workplaces risk not to enter anymore and end up in the so-called informal economy domain, which is a domain where basically, according to data, youth are way more common to be found than adults, and in which, to use the words of an anthropologist working at the LSE, they are just condemned to a kind of waithood status in which they cannot afford a marriage, they cannot afford a real formal job, nor a house, and so they end up staying in this informal economy, which is then their workplace, but they don't really have a way to improve their living conditions, and therefore they are more likely to end up in poverty and exclusion. So here, going towards the conclusion, of course, I'm probably listing some elephants in the space, meaning some things that I'm sure you're all aware of, but for many reasons I sometimes find difficult to address, because these are phenomenon quite common, which I tried to connect to megatrends like migration, education, and civic participation. So not to lose the logics of the presentation, we are still talking about workplace, the coexistence of different generations, how to avoid ageism's dynamics, connecting these three factors to these three megatrends. So in this final promise slide, you can see this framework, which in a way is aligned with the concept of life cycling policies, which was mentioned before by the representative of the EU Commission, that links age, work, space, and migration, thanks to the adoption of general approach for which is highly needed to move from the concept of emergency or brain drain to adopt the one of skill circulations. And therefore, this is encourages the information of policies like recognizing professional qualifications, facilitating tax regimes for those people that are working in different jurisdictions, so to make the migration the very, very end option, not the first option. And at a private level, so adopting a corporate social responsibility approach, firms can also do their part in adopting talent retention practices, diversity and inclusion internal policies, which finally recalls for the designing of spaces, workspaces, in which it is possible to favor cultural exchange, intergenerational onboarding, decompression spaces like for parenthood room that we've seen previously in the medical sector. This for contextualizing the migration approach. Going towards the second line, linking age, workspace, and education, of course here the important, and it was said also before, is to connect and to balance the quantity of investments in education with the quality of the investments in education, which is going to inform policies willing to invest more in the young people and in the reskilling of senior staff, as well as symmetrically in organizations or latitudes in which youth are the vast majority, developing qualified TVET, skill certification, and school-to-work programs. At the private level, again, companies can do their part by strengthening career paths, so making clear how a young professional could grow within an organization, avoiding job hopping or, at the most extreme cases, migration. And spatially, this is also calling for zoning, so designing spaces according to different functions coexisting, learning hubs accessible to different generations simultaneously, why not engaging university at the same time, and hot desking policies. Lastly, linking civic participation to age work and space, being in Italy, in which the first article of the Constitution highlights the relationship between democracy and labor in the Republic entity, I would say that the general approach to adopt is the one of recognizing that the partial or total marginalization of young people is generating a democratic, or could generate more and more a democratic bias, which is a distortion of political power in this sense. And this should inform policies supporting youth quotas at institutional level, term limits, and favoring a lowering of the age for the eligibility in a certain institutional position. Again, CSR approach within companies, inclusive governance, and corporate citizenship projects. Lastly, working spaces, how to design working spaces that could be conducive to this type of goals. For instance, by designing transparent and accessible decision-making rooms. So why not bringing down people, deciding things at board level from the top level of a huge skyscrapers and bring them in a place where they can be a little bit more accessible to other people. So making a little bit more physically transparent their place, the place where they take the most important decisions. Physical voice walls in transit areas, which are nice initiatives to favor the circulation of ideas, civic participation at in the workplace. And lastly, the so-called reverse town hall format, which is a nice format for familiarizing people with decision-making processes which are not top-down, but are more inclusive and more at a grassroots level. So that was all. I just have, an invitation for you. Should you still be interested in these topics, I would encourage you to have a look at a publication that will be released next week on age diversity in the workplace, and also have a look at the program of Scuola Bassetti, which is a very interesting 6-month initiative in which on October 15th and 22nd, I will personally moderate a sandbox, which is a format for innovating policies dedicated to society for all ages. And I will, of course, adopt this specific perspective of workplaces are engines for intergenerational integration. So thank you so much. Hope to keep in touch.